wanted to say just a few words today on the important subject of boundaries. Now, boundaries cross over with personal development and safe relationship training, and as these things often do, because in order to protect our personal growth and personal development, we need to be aware of certain areas in our life that can become hindrances to our growth. So it's not just a matter of pouring energy into our growth, but it's also importantly being able to identify areas that are actually hindering our growth and stopping us from being able to move forward. And I like to present concepts in a very simplified form, because I believe when we teach, we need to teach in a very simple form in order that people can grasp at least one concept within the teaching and take that away, and to be able to use that and to bear fruit in their life. So I'm going to present the concept of boundaries and also give you three important tips as far as boundaries are concerned. As I say, boundaries are very important because they help us to protect our lives. They help us to protect our growth, and they also help us to protect our happiness. But it's important to understand that we need to be aware that boundaries need to be set on every level. In other words, we need to be able to protect our emotional, our psychological, our spiritual and our physical welfare on every level, and be aware when someone is crossing a boundary on which level. So it's a pretty good idea to do a lot of research on boundaries and just how the crossing of boundaries can manifest. And in that way, you will be prepared prior to going into a situation or prior to going into a relationship. And also you will be very well prepared in order to take your life forward and be able to protect your personal growth, which is very important, as I say. So first of all, we need to understand that the first boundary that we need to set is usually with ourselves. Sometimes things happen in our lives and we realise that we haven't had boundaries. Usually it's in the form of a disrespectful relationship or situation, maybe at work or something. And we realise that there's an area of our life that we need to upgrade. And setting boundaries and being able to understand when they've been crossed and when someone is disrespecting those boundaries, and importantly understanding when someone is not going to listen to your boundaries, because some people will just repeatedly keep crossing your boundaries and basically trying to get a rise out of you. And so they get enjoyment out of being able to cross someone's boundaries, and the other person possibly not being able to do anything about that. So the first important point is to understand that once we set a boundary with ourselves, i.e. once we say to ourselves, I'm not going to allow people to walk all over my boundaries and disrespect me anymore, I'm actually going to do something about that, then that boundary that we've set with ourselves will go a long way to standing up in the future when someone crosses a boundary and we realise that we need to do something about that situation, or basically we're going to compromise ourselves, which is never a good idea. So that's the number one tip. Set that boundary with ourselves that I'm not going to allow someone to walk all over my boundaries, and that pretty much lays a good foundation for the future. As I said, importantly, we need to understand when someone is crossing an emotional boundary. For instance, they are damaging our emotions in some way through their actions or through their words. And we need to then address that and set boundaries by verbally stating that this behaviour is not appropriate and that we will no longer tolerate that behaviour. And also importantly, which I will get to in a moment, stating consequences to that behaviour if the boundaries are crossed again. Now, we can't be in control of someone else's behaviour, so if they do attempt to cross that boundary again, then they've been warned. But importantly, we need to come up with some action to back that up. As I said, boundaries need to protect us on every level. Otherwise, if we don't cover every level, then that area where we're not setting boundaries could possibly affect the other areas in our lives anyway. And also, it's really good practice to practice consistently setting boundaries where we need to, because it builds our self-esteem, it builds our confidence, and it builds our knowledge that we have the tools in order to set boundaries. And we are aware then that should anything occur, we have the wherewithal in order to do something about that. As I said, it's not about the other person's behaviour, but we've always got the option of doing something ourselves, whatever it is, even if it's walking away, which is, again, setting a boundary. It's sending a message that I will no longer tolerate this behaviour from you. So lastly, I want to make the important point about consequences, because often what will happen is someone who knows you very well, for instance, and they've known you from the past, take a lot of boundary busting behaviour. So they're used to you being able to tolerate their behaviour and not doing anything about it. It's important at this point to understand what's been going on and to understand that now things can change and you can do something about it. So when you're able and prepared to set your boundary, actually with that boundary there needs to be consequences. Otherwise, the person is not going to take you seriously. And also, if you state consequences but don't actually carry through on those consequences, then again, they're not going to take you seriously and they're going to continue to walk all over your boundaries, knowing that there is no consequence involved. So the important points are to set a boundary with ourselves that we are going to set boundaries in the future. Secondly, to understand that boundaries need to be set on all levels in order to protect ourselves completely. Thirdly, and importantly, we need to, prior to setting our boundary, understand what our consequences are going to be. Should that boundary be trespassed again in the future, and that needs to be stated, and then it needs to be carried through. So I hope those points are really, really helpful for you, because boundary setting is a skill, but it's really important to understand the impact it has on our self-concept and our self-esteem. So I leave that with you. Have a good day, and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye-bye.